All right, so this assessment you've brought us is about emotional instability, particularly how it connects to like conflicts with people and how that all affects you. And it seems like schema therapy is a big part of this. Can you kind of break that down for us?
Well, in schema therapy, we look at how your early experiences shape your core beliefs. It's all about yourself, others, and basically the world you're in.
Right. So these like schemas, they're kind of like filters then, shaping how you react to stuff.
Exactly. They color your perceptions and reactions throughout your life. Yeah.
So it's not just about like surface level reactions, but like these deeper beliefs driving
Yeah.
everything.
Absolutely. And in the assessment, there's several schemas that really stand out, like emotional deprivation, then there's mistrust slash abuse, also defectiveness or shame, unrelenting standards, and being hypercritical. Then there's vulnerability to harm or illness, and negativity or pessimism.
Wow, that's a lot to unpack. But I mean, just hearing you list those, especially like that mistrust, abuse, and vulnerability to harm, it makes me think about the situation you described.
Yeah, definitely. Let's dive into that more.
So you mentioned dealing with some manipulation, gaslighting even, and this is all within a co-housing situation, right? And it sounds like that really shook you up, made you feel unsafe.
Mm.
I'm wondering, how do you see that connecting to the schemas we talked about?
Yeah, so being gaslighted and manipulated, especially in a place where you should feel at home, like it messes with you. It makes sense that you'd feel totally unsafe. It really gets at those core fears of mistrust, abuse, and vulnerability. It makes you doubt everyone's intentions, and that just ramps up the feeling of danger.
That's totally understandable. Now, the assessment also talked about how you've been coping with all of this. Can you tell us more about that?
Sure. You've been using things like meditation, doing breath work, and then getting out in nature, those walks. It all helps regulate your nervous system, right? You even said you specifically look for what you call glimmers when you're out there. The sun, clouds, new places. That really stuck with me.
That is interesting, those glimmers. It sounds like you're instinctively drawn to things that bring you peace when everything else feels chaotic. But how does that connect to the schemas, you think?
I think searching for glimmers, especially in nature, it points right back to that vulnerability to harm schema. By surrounding yourself with the beauty of nature and its predictability, you're looking for safety and reassurance, right? Like a space where you've got more control, almost like you're subconsciously countering that unsafety and unpredictability from the co-housing situation.
Wow, that's a really strong connection. It shows how even our coping mechanisms, the ones that seem totally instinctual, often come from our deepest beliefs and experiences.
Yeah, absolutely. And while those glimmers help in the moment, the assessment also says it's hard to hold on to that calmness long term, especially when you go back to those same unsafe conditions.
Right? It's like this jarring contrast, finding peace and then being thrown back into a place that feels threatening. That back and forth must make it incredibly tough to feel any sense of lasting well-being. So how do you deal with that? What helps you feel more stable, more grounded day to day?
You mentioned sticking to a routine, really focusing on the day ahead of you, and like consciously trying to not get caught up in those emotional swings. Those are all good things.
Yeah, routine definitely brings structure, a sense of control, especially when everything around you feels like it's falling apart. And choosing where to put your attention, like on today, instead of dwelling on the past or worrying about the future, it's a good way to not feel so overwhelmed, right?
Yeah. And on the topic of handling tough emotions, there was that technique you described, the one you use when you're feeling vulnerable. I think you called it twisting your solar plexus to like close off other people's emotions. Can you elaborate on that a little?
Yeah, that one really threw me for a loop at first, I gotta admit. For anyone listening who might not be familiar, the solar plexus, it's that spot right below your chest. So what does closing off emotions actually mean in this sense? And what's the feeling you get when you do it?
Oh, it's not like you're shutting down their actual emotions. It's more like symbolically reinforcing your own boundaries. Because your solar plexus, it's often tied to your sense of self, your personal power, even intuition, right? So when you physically do something there, it's almost like you're drawing a line, like, this is me, that's you.
Ah, so you're creating that separation, like a buffer almost, to keep from feeling overwhelmed or intruded on by other people's energy. And it's really interesting you said you feel a sense of pride after using this, especially when it comes to avoiding manipulation. What is it about this specific action that makes you feel empowered?
It probably goes back to that feeling of powerlessness, the kind that comes with those mistrust and vulnerability schemas. When someone crosses your boundaries, tries to manipulate you, it's easy to feel helpless. But by doing this physical thing, it's like taking back control. It reminds you that you get to choose how to respond, even in situations that feel threatening.
Makes sense. It's like saying you might try to control me, but I'm still the one in charge of myself, asserting your strength when faced with all those tough emotions.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, I see you, I hear you, but I'm not going to let your emotions call the shots.
The assessment did mention that your coping mechanisms, while they're understandable considering everything, they are pretty intertwined with the schemas we've been talking about.
And that's where it gets tricky. It's like a chicken and egg thing, you know?
Mm.
Are these coping mechanisms because of your schemas, or are they, in a way, making those schemas even stronger?
That's such a good point. It makes you think, like, we can get caught in these loops where what we believe just feeds into how we act, and round it goes.
Exactly. That's why it's not enough to just see the patterns. We got to figure out how to interrupt them, how to create new, healthier ways of dealing with things.
Which brings us to that next step your assessment talked about. Working together to really tackle those triggers head on and finding new ways to cope, ones that are more adaptive. As we move forward, what feels most important to you to zero in on? So we've really been digging into your experience with emotional instability, huh? Finding those deep-seated schemas, looking at what's happened, and how you've learned to cope. As we shift gears towards actually doing something about all this, what feels like the biggest takeaway for you so far?
I think just realizing that these schemas are there, that's the biggest thing. You know, like acknowledging the role of mistrust, abuse, and vulnerability to harm, it puts you in a powerful position. Now you can start to create real change.
So it's not about like beating yourself up over these schemas, right?
Yeah.
It's more about understanding how they might be holding you back and then deciding what you want to do about it.
Exactly. We can start to ask, where did these schemas even come from? What happened that made them take root? And then the big one, how can we challenge those old beliefs that might not be doing you any favors anymore?
Because even if those beliefs help protect you in the past, maybe they're not so necessary now.
Right. Exactly. Take that feeling of needing to close off your emotions as protection. It makes sense given the manipulation and gaslighting you went through. But moving forward, we can find healthier ways to set boundaries, you know, without feeling like you got to completely shut down or disconnect from other people.
Which could actually open you up to more real connection with people, right? I mean, if you always assume the worst, it's got to be hard to let anyone in.
Totally. And that's where we get into these adaptive coping mechanisms. It's not just about handling tough emotions. It's about finding strategies that actually help you live a better life overall.
So it's about figuring out how to deal with those feelings of mistrust or vulnerability.
Yeah,
Yeah. But not letting them control you or stop you from having good relationships.
exactly. Like maybe you need to learn better ways to communicate so you can ask for what you need. Or maybe it's about being more mindful, staying present, grounded. Or even finding creative outlets to work through all those emotions in a healthy way. There's so much out there.
It's really like a journey you're on, huh? One of self-discovery and growth. And that takes guts, being kind to yourself, and a willingness to try new ways of just being. As you keep going, what are you most curious about?
For me, it's that potential for real transformation that's exciting. Because by facing these schemas head on, by finding healthier ways to cope, you're basically rewriting your own story. You're going from reacting out of fear to choosing how you want to be.
That is powerful. It reminds us that even though our past shapes us, it doesn't have to define us, right?
100%. And as you go on this journey, remember, you don't have to do it alone. Finding a therapist, someone who really gets schema therapy, it can make all the difference. They can guide you, offer a safe place to process all of this.
It's like having someone in your corner, right?
Yeah.
Helping you navigate those rough emotional waters and find a calmer sea. And on that note, we'll leave you with this thought. What's one small thing you can do today even to start writing your own story, to start feeling a little bit better? Thanks for being here for another deep dive.